Hello everybody, I am Jared Ross, the GeneaVlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I will be reacting to my DNA test results and my family background story, I'm Very Mixed Breed, by Hi from Hamburg. Now, this is a channel I'm not familiar with. They have 60,000 subscribers, so, decent size. I looked into her a little bit, and from what I can tell, she's an American who lives in Hamburg. From the thumbnail, it seemed to indicate she might also have some sort of Australian ancestry. So maybe one of her parents is American, the other is Australian. I really couldn't tell anything else. Otherwise, she had a bunch of different European countries up on her thumbnail. So I imagine she's probably just some sort of European mix. So hopefully she'll give good context before she dives into her results. But before we jump into the video, please be sure to give this a like. It really does help me out. Also, be sure to subscribe and click that bell for notifications on future videos. With all that fun stuff said, let's go ahead and jump into the video.
Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm an American girl who is living in Hamburg, Germany, and in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about my family heritage. A lot of you guys have been asking me, where is my family from? And I think it's a really interesting question. I'm going to share my genetic test results, and I also talked about this on my old channel, but I got an email a month ago saying that my genetic tests were updated and some information was added, so it'll be a surprise for me.
Okay, so she didn't just talk about her ancestry in a previous video, she actually did a DNA test. I wonder what her old channel is, if it's still up, but I guess hopefully she'll give the full breakdown in this video
and
too.
A surprise for you guys. Let me know down below in the comments, push pause, type out what you think I am in the comments down below, and then tell me how wrong or right you were based on your guess.
European. She has a little bit paler skin, so maybe like a northwestern European, maybe. She does actually remind me a bit of some of the cousins on my mom's side. For one, she has really Sephardic eyes, or it's kind of weird to say that, but in my family, the Nunes Vaz family, my mom's side, we all have these blue-green eyes. And even when we met all these distant cousins, a lot of us had it. So it'd be kind of crazy if she ended up having some sort of Jewish ancestry or Sephardic ancestry specifically. It would be also cool because she lives in Hamburg, and Hamburg had a Sephardic Jewish community, part of what was known as the Western Sephardic diaspora. So if she is descended from that, that'd be pretty crazy, because then she might have a connection she could find to Hamburg.
I think a lot of people guess that I look maybe Eastern European, which is a third true.
Yeah, I mean, I guess she kind of does in a way. I think more Western European or Northwestern European.
I don't know if you can tell by my skin tone, I'm pretty pale, and I actually get that from my dad's side. I am 50% Australian, so my dad is from Australia, and
Okay, but where's his ancestry from? Because unless he's an Aboriginal, which, I mean, I guess it's possible, but I highly doubt based on how pale she is, and she's saying she gets it from her dad's side. So hopefully she gives a better breakdown, not just he's from Sydney.
My dad's parents came from England, and then also Wales. So
Northwestern European.
Welsh, English, and then I don't know if I should count Australia, because that's kind of, kind of like the US. I'm American.
Okay, yeah.
That's pretty clear, but Americans are just kind of mixtures of all the other countries. That's what I know from my dad's side. My mom's side gets a little more interesting, which makes me, I feel like, a little more interesting. It's a big mixture. In English, we call someone like me a mutt, or that's also what you call a dog that has all these different types of dog breeds.
I honestly have used that term multiple times when people ask me, well, how would you describe me? And a lot of times for people with European ancestry, great example, Mr. Beat, my recent series where I traced his family tree. First few episodes, I look into his DNA, and it really is what I would like to call a European mutt. You're just a big mixture of different, European ancestry. So yeah, mutt's a term I've used multiple times, so it's funny she's using that here too.
Breeds mixed into one. My mom's side, my great-grandma and my great-grandpa both came from Poland. and they were
Okay.
around 2 hours outside of Warsaw in Poland by driving. So they left Poland around 10 years before World War II started, I think, and they learned English actually when they got to the US. I know that my great-grandparents chose not to teach my grandma their language. They chose to learn English and speak English to my grandma, which kind of shows how things were at the time. They didn't want to be seen as outsiders in the US, so they didn't want their children to feel like outsiders. So unfortunately for me, that would have been so cool if my family continued on teaching Polish and also Yiddish. They spoke Yiddish. That would have been awesome.
So were they more than just Polish? Were they also Jewish? Or were they Polish and Jewish, or just Jewish? Or... All right, that's pretty funny, because I mentioned that whole thing with what if she was Jewish. All right, let's continue.
Awesome. I would have loved to be able to speak Polish too, but yeah. I understand that the times then were different and discrimination was scary. So there's my mom's side. My mom's dad's side came from Turkey. From what I've heard, I think they were in Spain before they were in Turkey.
Oh, so she does have some Sephardi ancestry. Wow. And that's... So she may have a connection to the Hamburg community, but it wouldn't be so apparent. She'd probably need to do some digging, because the Turkish Sephardic communities were part of what was the Eastern Sephardic diaspora. So when a lot of genealogists discuss the Sephardic diaspora, there's three different waves that we discuss. There's the Eastern Sephardim, who left much earlier, some before 1391, but all the way up to 1492 and later. And they traveled to mostly the Ottoman Empire, so places that are now in Turkey, Greece. Then around 1492, right around the fall of Granada, and right around after the fall of Granada, there was the North African wave, where they went into North Africa, places like Morocco, Tunisia, Libya. And then there was the Western diaspora, which was mostly the Sephardic Jews who had gone from Spain to Portugal, because Portugal hadn't enacted the Inquisition yet. They enacted it later. And once that was enacted later, then a lot of those Jews, a lot of their descendants, then would travel out to different areas in Western Europe. So a lot of those communities included Amsterdam, Livorno, Italy, Hamburg, Germany, London, Bayonne, France. And then these were also the communities that would end up coming over to the New World, to North America, South America. I even had a part of my family that was living in Recife, Brazil in the 17th century. But this also includes places like Suriname, Curacao, Jamaica, and, places that a lot of people probably don't even realize that there were these major Sephardic Jewish communities dating back, to the 17th century. But even though there were these three different waves of Sephardic diaspora, there still was contact and communication between them, but they all had slightly different setups in a way. So it's certainly possible, if she does have this Eastern Sephardi ancestry, that she may actually have a connection to the Hamburg community. So it'd be really cool probably for her to go check out what's left. I know there's the cemetery. I can't remember if there's a synagogue still left, but I'm sure there's all sorts of stuff that she could check out. Let's continue.
I don't remember how long they were in Turkey before Spain, so that's actually what I understand from my family background. So I know I have these countries as my heritage and my background, but I don't know any of the cultural things from those countries, so it's kind of weird that I don't speak any Polish. I don't know any Polish things. Now I'm gonna check out my genetic test results.
Okay.
And see how accurate they are compared to what I already know.
Now, before we get into her results, I want to make a revised guess now that we have an idea of her ancestry. I think it's going to be really interesting, for one, depending who she tests with, because some of these tests do actually try to decipher Sephardic Jewish ancestry specifically, as opposed to just saying European Jewish, or some companies would just say Ashkenazi, even though it meant more than just Ashkenazi. So I'm pretty sure, based on what she said, I'm sure through her Australian side, she'll probably get around 50% Northwestern Europe. I'm sure it may be more of a mix than just that, especially with the history of Europe. Then depending on her Polish side, it sounds like that was just straight Ashkenazi Jewish. You know, assuming it is all Ashkenazi, not a mixture of Polish and Ashkenazi, then I imagine she'll get about 25% Ashkenazi. And depending on if they can decipher the Sephardi from Ashkenazi, we would then expect about 25% Sephardi. But most of these tests, even if they do try to decipher Sephardi, it seems that they have a high margin of error. And I say it seems because they haven't actually released any of their white papers describing how they're coming to their conclusions. So it's hard to really get the numbers, such as our precision and recall numbers, which I discuss in my measuring DNA test performance video. She might get some Iberian, she might get some sort of, Balkan or Turkish reading, or something, around the Mediterranean, Italian, Southern European. But to me, this goes to show how knowing your actual family tree is much more powerful in knowing your actual history and your story than just these DNA test admixtures, because the admixture just gives you a really pixelated view of your ancestry, whereas when you do your family tree and your genealogy, it's almost like you're cleaning up that picture where all of a sudden you can actually tell what it is, not just like it kind of looks like it might be that. But now let's go ahead and see what her results are.
So I have an account at 23andMe. The results are...
They don't decipher Sephardi.
50.9% British and Irish.
Okay.
And I am 32.5% Ashkenazi Jewish. I am 2.7% Spanish and Portuguese. Let's click on British and Irish. Number 1, my family most likely came from Greater London. That's pretty cool. So I think I've talked about this in some other videos too, but when they give you these breakdowns of highly likely matches and stuff, the regions that you're connected, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have ancestry in that area. It means that of all of your DNA matches that they're finding who have also the British and Irish admixture, they're finding that the ancestry they list are in these areas. And usually you will have the larger areas higher up in the list just because there is such a large connection from anybody who's British to London, or even beyond that, anybody who comes from the United Kingdom, whether they're British, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, whatever, you're likely going to have a lot of relatives, not necessarily ancestors, but relatives who have connections to London. And so even though they may be listing connections to London that aren't even related to you, it's through a different side of their family, 23andMe can't tell that. All they can tell is, well, all of these people also have British and Irish just like her, and all of these people also list that they have ancestry connected to London, so that's going to be higher on the list. And so when you look at these lists, a lot of times it's very similar for other people. It certainly can give you hints, and it, gives you an idea, but it can't be any sort of thing that you say, oh, okay, my ancestry is definitely connected to London. It might not necessarily be your ancestry. It might just more be that you have a lot of relatives where they have ancestral connections to London. So let's continue. Followed by Greater Manchester, Glasgow City. Nice. Likely match for Ireland. That's cool. County Dublin. I mean, my skin makes me feel like I'm Irish. I have some hints of red as well in my natural hair. 32.5% Ashkenazi Jewish. My great-grandparents were Ashkenazi Jewish, so I do know that. Ashkenazi Jewish people settled in Central and Eastern Europe.
I should say, she was mentioning that I think it was her mom's side, one side is Ashkenazi, the other side is Sephardi. I think I got that right, which means that we would then expect 25% Ashkenazi, 25% Sephardi. But it's 35%, and while it is certainly possible she might have just inherited a whole lot of that Ashkenazi DNA over a lot of the Sephardi DNA, it seems more likely that what's happening is it's reading some of that Sephardi DNA as Ashkenazi, because it is so hard to decipher the Ashkenazi autosomal DNA from the Sephardi autosomal DNA. while there are, they're trying to do that, and some of the companies are comfortable in making some guesses, not all of them are. And 23andMe does not do any sort of breakdown of Jewish ancestry beyond Ashkenazi, at least as far as I know. I'd have to look again. The two companies that do that kind of a breakdown are MyHeritage and Family Tree DNA.
In the late Middle Ages, and it's fun looking at this little dial. It's like 50% blue.
I love how she just says Australian.
Northwestern European, British and Irish. I didn't even know I was Irish, so this is actually a surprise if I'm actually Irish. I was mostly expecting Wales. I don't see Wales. Native American. What? Let's go to the next section, which is 6.2% Southern European, which is Spanish and Portuguese.
So this is all coming from the Sephardi side, and whether or not this is actual Spanish and Portuguese and Italian and Southern European, or if that's Sephardi. And so it is common thing that anyone who has Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry, or that's most of what they know, if they get any of these Spanish and Portuguese, Italian, or broadly Southern European, there's often someone who will come up with a hypothesis that, well, that could be coming from Sephardi ancestry, and it certainly could be, but it might not always be. All right, let's continue.
What? I did not know I have any Italian. 1.6%, that's a surprise. Western Asian, North African, 7%. In Northern West Asian, 2.3%.
Now this is really
Iranian, Caucasian, and Mesopotamian.
So this is really interesting, but it also makes a lot of sense. For one, North African. I already discussed the Sephardi diaspora. Well, where was it? One of the diaspora waves to? North Africa. So it makes sense that there might be a difficulty in deciphering Sephardi ancestry from North African ancestry. Same thing with, Arabian, Egyptian, Levantine, but again, we're dealing with these small percentages. And then even with the West Asian, broadly Western Asian and broadly Western Asian and North African. Well, that's still that North African tie, but then even Northern West Asian, Iranian, Caucasian, and Mesopotamian. Well, when you consider those areas versus the Ottoman Empire, where many of these Sephardic communities were popping up, these Eastern Sephardi communities, well, it makes a lot of sense. But there's a whole lot of possibilities with it. And that's one of the reasons why I constantly reiterate, it's all about the actual genealogy. You can build out the family tree. These things, the admixtures can give you a hint. If she started tracing her family tree and then she's going up one of the lines and all of a sudden she starts to see names that seem to be more of like a North African style name, or, some sort of ancestry that connects to North Africa, it makes sense. But this does not mean that she does have North African no matter what.
North African, Arab, Egyptian, and Levantine, broadly Western Asian, and North African. Okay, interesting. So I was hoping to see something about Poland, but I think there's other companies like Ancestry.com, I think is the one that gives you more precise things like that. So hope you guys found this video interesting. Let me know down below. See you guys in the next video.
Okay, so that was okay. I kind of, I always wish that they'd go into DNA matches. For her, she would probably see a lot of matches because for both of her Sephardi and Ashkenazi ancestry, she's going to be dealing with endogamy, and that means that you're going to have a lot more matches. But really, a lot of the different kinds of Jewish population groups, there's this endogamy, which basically causes all Jews to look like they're closer related to each other than they necessarily are. And the reason for this is because endogamy means that people are marrying only within that group. So for generations and generations, Jews were only marrying Jews. So it's not necessarily like an incest thing. It's more of that everybody who's Jewish is then related in multiple ways. So, someone may be a DNA match for someone who's Jewish and they'll look like a third or fourth cousin. But in reality, that person is their closest relation is like a seventh or eighth cousin. It's just that they're seventh or eighth cousin 5 or 6 different ways. But a seventh or eighth cousin, that means that you're dealing with someone where your shared ancestor is a 6th or 7th great grandparent. And 6th or 7th great grandparents for somebody like my age, that's going to be somebody who was born in like the 17th century, maybe the 18th century, but maybe even as far back as the 16th century. And most Jewish family trees don't go back that far because of the limitations of documentation. because of the history of Jews being persecuted, and some other factors like surnames not being adopted until the early 19th century. But still, it's doubtful for most people who are Jewish to be able to trace many lines back that far. And just to comment on what she said there at the end about Ancestry having a better breakdown, for one, she's not going to find Polish in there even if she had Polish ancestry, because it's just going to break it down as generally Eastern European. Some of the sites might try to define Polish, but I don't think any of them do. And it'd probably be a really difficult thing to do, to define Polish anyway, because of how the borders have changed so much over the past 100 or 200 years, not even considering even further back than that. So the tests really aren't going to be able to decipher that, but even more so, it sounds more like that side of her family was Jewish pretty much, not just, a mixture of Polish and Jewish, but basically just Jews who were living in Poland. I imagine she'd have a very interesting family tree to look into. I'd especially be interested to see, what her Sephardi side looks like, because a lot of the Sephardic genealogy in Turkey is really difficult to do because of a lack of records, although I don't have a lot of experience with those communities, but I have worked with a lot of people who do, and so I've kind of heard some things about it. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I do hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to give this a like. That really does help me out. If you'd like to subscribe, you can click right about here. It's completely free to do so. And if you'd like to learn about how to measure DNA test performance, check out this video.